To today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, and that's how to reduce the nuclear threat. My guest today is an expert on this topic, Dr. Frank N. von Hippel, Senior Research Physicist and Professor of Public and International Affairs Emeritus of the Program on Science and Global Security at Princeton University, is my guest today. His forthcoming book is titled Ending the Nuclear Arms Race, A Physicist's Quest. Dr. Von Hippel, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate you being with me today. A lot of people, a lot of scientists and political types say that the number one challenge is climate change, or the climate crisis. But right behind that, number two has to be this nuclear threat. Your book is so timely. What is the thrust of ending the nuclear arms race?
Well, it's basically a memoir and an alert. The we really tried to. I tried to tell how far we got in the 1980s and 1990s in reducing the danger of nuclear war, and how far we have still to go.
Have we made some strides in this area? I know the United Nations has been somewhat the epicenter of the nuclear arms reduction conferences, small arms reduction, that type of thing. And it seems like it's one step forward, two steps backwards at times. But have we made progress?
Well, we did. I mean, we reduced the number of nuclear weapons in the world by almost a factor of 10. And also, we got from a situation where at the beginning of the Reagan administration, both sides thought the other one thought it could fight and win a nuclear war, to a situation where Reagan and Gorbachev came to agree on the mantra: a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. That's real progress. But we still have 10,000 nuclear weapons.
Well, right, exactly. And do we still have nine nuclear countries? Is that right?
We do have nine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, with North Korea being the most recent, I guess, and Israel, who never admitted to having them, but we know they have them. So that's neither here nor there, I guess. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, the one thing we hear a lot about, I haven't heard much about lately, is the doomsday clock.
Yeah.
And I think this is the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists or something, a group
That's
like
right.
that put this up.
That's
What is
right.
that doomsday clock about?
Well, the doomsday is clock is their way of trying to keep people, uh, you know, aware of the dangers, and they broadened it. It was originally for nuclear war, but now it includes climate change and other existential threats.
Mhm.
They just use it as a platform to annually remind people we have these existential threats, and we have to do more about dealing with them.
Exactly. And the last time, I think, as I recall, and maybe you saw it at a different time than I did, but our best time was when it was 5 minutes before midnight, which was back when we were having a détente with Russia, the old Soviet Union. And now it's like 90 seconds until the
Right.
doomsday. So it's a sharp reminder that we need to move forward on this whole discussion, as you are doing without a doubt. Well, you were talking about a nuclear war. There, people have talked about it. I've heard members of Congress say we could have a limited nuclear war. That's absolutely impossible, isn't it?
And when I came in the 1970s into this issue, there was discussion about limited nuclear war, and our Secretary of Defense actually said he thought that it would kill only about 20,000 people. The idea was we would aim at each other's nuclear weapons and not at each other's cities. Well, I was part of a review of that statement. The Congress asked for a review. It seemed low to them, and when we corrected all the mistakes that the Defense Department had made, it increased 1,000 times to 20 million. That's still a lot less than all-out nuclear war, but that I mean, you realize how self-deluded the Pentagon was about what it was talking about.
Exactly. And of course, the spinoff of any type of nuclear exchange is going to be nuclear fallout. And some of the scientists say we'd have this nuclear winter that would basically destroy our ability to raise food on the planet. It would just be an absolute disaster just from that standpoint alone. Not to mention the fact that all of this fallout is going to get into your not only your water system but into your milk supply system, into your crops, and just on across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the biggest consequences would be, of course, I mean, the nuclear winter assumes that the cities would be targeted,
Mhm.
and all the smoke from the cities it would be lofted into the stratosphere and block out the sun for years and causing a global famine. Uh, if the cities were targeted, I mean, it would be horrible, and but it would be magnified by the nuclear winter. I used to say, well, if the cities are targeted, that's why do we need more to know more?
Uh,
Uh, but the nuclear winter, uh, and in fact, the government has not supported any research on the possibility of nuclear winter. It's all been private research. And
mhm.
I actually persuaded Congress to ask the National Academy of Sciences to do a review of this, and its review is due out soon.
Mhm. And years ago, we heard a lot about the nuclear winter, and now it seems it's just they've sort of forgotten it. And it seems like to me, anytime you have any exchange with another country, so many of these military leaders predict how these wars are going, and almost every one of them is wrong. You never know what your enemy is going to do or how that enemy perceives how powerful you are or what city you're going to hit next. You do not know all the unknowns. And it's just absolutely insane, I think, to think about even a limited nuclear war. And of course, we've heard Putin yammering about that over in Ukraine. He hadn't done it yet, thank goodness. But I remember when Chernobyl went up and how it literally caused pollution throughout a large part of Europe and even came around to the United States to a
Right.
large degree. So it's absolutely, in my opinion, just ludicrous to even discuss it. We should be talking about how to reduce this nuclear stockpile.
That's right. And I mean, the when people talk about limited nuclear war, they they don't realize what the targeting actually is. It's not just on the weapons of the other side. It's on the command and control and communications and the supporting industry. And those things are in the cities. So that even if you don't target populations, uh, you would destroy cities.
Exactly. Years ago, I saw figures that, and it's bound to be higher today. They said it cost the U.S. Defense Department $125 million a day just to maintain our nuclear stockpile. Is that figure correct, or are there new figures? It's probably
Well,
hard to
it's
estimate.
it's running tens of billions of dollars a year,
Mhm.
up toward $100 billion or so. It's the defense budget is a lot bigger, but that's a lot of money, and it's getting bigger
It certainly is, yes.
because
Now,
we're right now in a cycle where we're so-called modernizing our nuclear forces for the third time. I mean, the first time was during the Eisenhower and Kennedy years. Then it was during another cycle of new missiles, new bombers, and new submarines during the Reagan period, and now we're in a third period. So we should be working on getting rid of them, not on modernizing them for another 50 years.
exactly. And this modernization, they're talking years ago when it started this whole discussion, I think under Obama. the Obama administration, and maybe even before, they were talking about how well we could do it for $1 trillion a year. Well, that's sheer fantasy. There's nothing out there they're going to do this large of a task for $1 trillion. My guess is it would cost easily 3 trillion or more. What, or should we even be doing this? Should we not be getting into agreements to reduce these
We should,
horrible weapons and not spending money on that we could put into schools and roads and hospitals?
yeah, it's about 100 billion a year, but it is a huge waste of money. But it also we should be getting rid of the weapons that could cause an accidental nuclear war. And I've been campaigning against the intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are in a launch on warning posture because they're targetable. So that would give the president only a few minutes to decide that this is a real nuclear attack coming in, and and whether he should launch those missiles or not. And once those missiles are launched, then you launch everything.
Exactly. And we've seen, I've seen, I'm sure you've seen more classified information than that, but I remember seeing something that there have been at least 12 near misses, near incidents where we almost had a nuclear exchange with the old Soviet Union, or something would have gone wrong that would cause this. But we're going to come back in just a moment and talk about that. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved in a PBS or community access television station, or you have a podcast, or you are with an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a computer, you like our shows and you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're talking about one of the major issues confronting all 8.2 billion people on the planet, and that's the possibility of a nuclear exchange. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Dr. Frank N. von Hippel has just recently, or his forthcoming book, I should say, is titled Ending the Nuclear Arms Race, A Physicist's Quest. Dr. von Hippel, this is such a dangerous topic. It's one that's been undertaken by hundreds of organizations over the years. One of the key players has been the United Nations, this armament part of the UN system. And they've held conferences, they've developed treaties, and most countries have signed on to a large number of these treaties. One is the Non-Proliferation Treaty. What is what's called the NPT? What does the NPT do, and why is the United Nations so important in bringing the players of the world together?
The Non-Proliferation Treaty was concluded in 1970, so 50 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was an agreement between the then 5 nuclear weapon states and almost all the rest of the countries, that if the rest of the countries would not acquire nuclear weapons, those 5 nuclear weapon states would get rid of theirs. And so there has been increasing tension. The 4 countries held out, and they did acquire nuclear weapons as well. But the countries that agreed not to acquire nuclear weapons, with the exception of North Korea, have lived up to their commitment. But the 5 countries, but they say that, and it's true, the 5 countries that signed that treaty, the nuclear armed countries, have not lived up to their commitment. We've reduced at the end of the Cold War, but right now things actually I don't see any reductions in the foreseeable future. In fact, I see increases again.
Unfortunately, I agree. I think that's the only way they seem to know how to deal with the problem. We'll just add on a few more nuclear weapons and whatever. But I might mention to our viewers too, we have done interviews over the years on this nuclear problem, and Undersecretary General of the United Nations Nakamitsu has been on the program twice, so our viewers could go back to our webpage, and if they're interested in following up with interviews that we did with her. The other situation with nuclear weapons is that it's hard to get the five permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the permanent members of the Security Council, the United States, Russia, China, France, and Britain, to come together on some of these nuclear deals because they don't want to give up any, I guess, any of the weapons that they have or any, they think they're going to give up their power over them. What role should they be playing that maybe they're not playing right now?
Well, they have adopted the mantra, that Reagan and Gorbachev uh, started, that a nuclear war cannot be won and must not be fought. But China is building up, and the U.S. in response, seeing it's China as an adversary like Russia, is really on the verge of increasing from the already 2,000 or so warheads we have deployed to more. Even though I think 100 nuclear warheads is plenty to deter any other country, and in fact, it's an interesting historical fact that we did threaten China with the nuclear attacks during the Korean War and during the Taiwan Strait crises in the decade afterwards. Then in 1964, China did its first nuclear test. And we haven't threatened them with nuclear weapons since. So even before you have your first deployed nuclear weapon, deterrence holds. And so that shows you how excessive our concerns are about that drive these nuclear buildups.
Exactly. And the weapons of today are so much more powerful than the atomic bombs we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. There's just no comparison. And you mentioned the figure of 100. A lot of the experts have said we could have 100, and that's enough to destroy the world. We don't need to keep building more and more. We're just going to make the rubble bounce higher.
Right.
When we destroy the world, the rubble will bounce a little higher. So, which is a pretty stark reality to face, I think. Well, let me ask you, in your book, I'm sure you have it. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but what specific recommendations, are there four or five recommendations you would make to President Xi or to Putin or to President Biden or to President Trump? Or if you had them in a room, what five recommendations would you make to them to reduce this nuclear threat?
Well, let me just two. Let me just reduce that number to
All
two.
right, two, that's fine.
And the first one is no first use. If in fact a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, then and they've all agreed on that, then why don't they agree to no first use? Now, China actually has been pushing no first use, and our position is we shouldn't take anything off the table as far as a deterrent is concerned, and some of our allies, like Japan and in Eastern Europe, say we should keep that nuclear threat on the table. But that's one. The other one I would mention is that we should get away from the launch on warning postures. U.S. ICBMs are in launch on warning posture. That's just tempting fate, especially in a world where we're getting into cyber attacks and where we have unstable leaders sometimes. It's crazy. If we lost the 400 ICBMs to an attack, we still have 1,000 warheads at sea and untargetable in nuclear submarines. So those are the two at the top of
Those
my
are
list.
two, yeah. Can you explain that launch and warning posture a little more
Yeah.
as to what it is?
Well, it really relates to the fact that nuclear missiles have become accurate enough so they can target each other, even in hardened silos. And so in the 1970s, actually before the Soviet missiles were that accurate, we adopted a launch on warning posture. Now, the attack that we're worried about would be from missiles which could be launched and reached our missiles in 30 minutes. So that produces a very short timeline for any launch on warning decision. The first would, you need about 10 minutes to assess that attack. And the other end, you need several minutes to launch our missiles before the warheads got here. In the middle, you have the president, who's the decider, with confused information being told that he has to leave to get out of the White House. The White House might be attacked, and under those conditions, being pressed actually by the Strategic Command that he must launch because otherwise that fraction of our warheads would be destroyed if the attack is real. And those warheads on our missiles have targets which must be covered. So it's the risks of an accidental nuclear war that we incur is in that way is far greater than the danger of being attacked.
It certainly is. Yes. You reminded me of a book, I think The Man Who Saved the World, I believe is the title. And we're down to about our last 30 seconds, but I still want your comment on a Soviet monitor of the whole radar system or whatever. And he saw incoming missiles, but he did not report them to the higher ups because they would have launched missiles immediately. And he only saw, I think, 4, 5, 6 or something. He said if the United States was going to hit the Soviet Union, they'd hit it with a lot more than 4 or 5. But in the last 30 seconds, how important was his decision?
It was very important, and what the Soviet early warning system saw was actually reflections, the sun reflecting off the clouds over U.S. missile silos, not the infrared signals from the boosters, the exhaust of the U.S. missiles being launched. That's an example, and there have been others.
Exactly. Well, in our last 15 seconds, what message do you have to our viewers who are watching this show?
Well, we at the end of the Cold War, we demobilized the movement to get rid of nuclear weapons. We thought the risk had gone away. It hasn't gone away. It is another existential threat, like the threat of climate warming, and we really have to deal with that as well. We have to focus on that as well.
We certainly do. And no matter how advanced we get, accidents can happen. And once we start launching nuclear weapons, that's it. The ball game is over in all probability for every living organism on the planet if it gets that bad. But Dr. Frank von Hippel, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.